Nowhere to Call Home by Cynthia DeFelice, Chapter 25. The night was a long, dark tunnel into which Frankie fell. She sat on the floor of Jack's shack with Stewpot's head in her lap. She knew he was dead, and yet, for a time, she continued to believe that any minute he would open his eyes, flash his grin, and say, "This place is a dump. Let's blow out of here, Blue." Finally, as the night wore on, she gave up hope and simply sat, staring into the darkness, stunned with sorrow. Jack woke up and looked at her. "I'm sorry, Frank," he said. "That's the way it is with pneumonia. You did everything you could." His words didn't comfort Frankie. Jack didn't know that she could have taken Stewpot to her aunt's house days ago, when he might have had a chance to recover. If only she had tried harder to talk him into it. If only she hadn't given in so easily. "Guess we better get busy," said Jack. Frankie's brain was dull and sluggish, and Jack's words had no meaning. She watched him as he got out of bed, pushed aside the rug in the doorway, and disappeared. Frankie continued to sit with Stewpot's head in her lap. When Jack returned, a shovel with a broken handle in his hand, she looked at him blankly and didn't move. Jack put the shovel down, bent and lifted Stewpot, still wrapped in his blanket, out of her arms. "Bring the shovel, Frank," he said in a voice that was gruff, but not unkind. Feeling as if she were in a dream, Frankie followed Jack to the far edge of the vacant lot, near a row of spindly poplar trees. There were 3 graves, one marked by a handmade wooden cross, one by a crudely lettered sign, and one a ragged doll. "Illegal, probably," said Jack with a shrug. "But what else are we going to do?" Frankie stood by in a daze while Jack dug. When the hole was deep enough, Jack took Stewpot's blanket and spread it across the bottom, then lowered the body into the hole and started to wrap the blanket over Stewpot's face. "Wait," said Frankie. Her voice was a faint croak. Jack looked at her. "Want to say something?" he asked. Frankie stared at him. "You know, like a prayer." A prayer, thought Frankie. To whom? To God, who had allowed Stewpot to die? To President Hoover, who didn't seem to care that people were dying in desperate places named after him? She was afraid that if she spoke, she would scream and never stop. She was afraid of the terrible sadness that was filling her chest and her throat, and she pushed it down, as far down inside her as she could. In its place, an anger rose. She could feel it building and was grateful. It was better to be angry. It made her feel strong. Words came from her mouth in short, hard bursts. "It's wrong," she gasped. "All of this." Her arms flew out, taking in the grave, the whole of Hooverville, the city of Seattle, and beyond. He didn't have to die. He shouldn't have died. Tears fell steadily from her eyes as she thought about Stewpot. He had shown her his spirit, his courage, and his humor. She wondered if she would be able to find those qualities in herself in the days ahead. She had no idea how she would do it, but she promised Stewpot right then and there that she would try. Bending down, she took the knife from Stewpot's pocket and put it into his hand. "A bow needs a knife," he had told her with his wide grin. Wherever Stewpot was now, or wherever he was going, she wanted him to have it. Not caring what Jack might think, Frankie leaned over and kissed Stewpot's cold cheek, then gently covered him with his blanket. She rose and put her hands into her coat pockets, where her fingers closed around her harmonica. She remembered the first night she had met Stewpot, when he'd said, "That's a mighty sweet song, Frankie Blue." Raising the harmonica to her lips, she played Amazing Grace, Stewpot's favorite, as sweetly and gently as she could. Then she and Jack pushed the dirt back into the hole. When they had finished, Jack leaned on the shovel and said flatly, "Let me tell you something, Frank. You say what's happening is wrong. Well, get used to it. The swells run the world. They're the ones who could make it better." He laughed abruptly. "If they wanted to." Frankie didn't answer, and Jack went on. "People like us, we can't change anything. Look around." His mouth curved into a bitter smile. "Most of us can't even change our clothes." Jack turned to leave. "You can stay if you want," he said, "but I can't feed you." Frankie nodded, her mind elsewhere. "Thank you," she said absently. Jack may have heard her, or not. He was already walking away. Frankie didn't know how long she remained there. When she finally moved, she was stiff with cold and dizzy with hunger, but her steps were sure and unwavering. At Jack's shelter, she looked through Stewpot's bundle for anything that might tell her how to get in touch with his family. Surely Mrs. Haskell would want to know where her son was buried, but there was nothing. Frankie took the little box and 2 wooden toys Stewpot had carved and put them in her bag. She bid Jack goodbye, then headed toward the railroad station. As she walked, she thought about what Jack had said and decided he was wrong. She refused to get used to a world where poor people died in places like Hooverville. It seemed to her that Jack had given up, just as Murph and her father had. They had let the hopelessness move right into their hearts and take over. But Stewpot hadn't let that happen, and she wasn't about to either. Frankie moved through the train station as inconspicuously as possible, looking for the ladies' room. There she washed her hands and face, and changed from her dirty clothing back into her blouse, stockings, and pinafore from her bag. Examining her reflection in the mirror, she saw a strange mixture of Frankie Blue and Frances Barrow. She didn't really care what she looked like. She merely wished to blend in with the other passengers, who were clean and well-dressed for their journeys. It felt odd to walk into the train station and ride up to the ticket window. "How much does it cost for a one-way ticket to Chicago?" she asked. The clerk checked the tables. "It's $40 for coach. You'd have to sit the whole way, of course. Another $8.25, and you get a tourist berth in the sleeping car." Frankie had $43.65 left. Luckily, it was enough for a seat. After sleeping in boxcars, sitting the whole way to Chicago on a soft, upholstered seat in a heated car sounded like the height of luxury. There was food on the train, and she'd have money left over to buy some. "One-way coach to Chicago will be fine," she said. The clerk handed her the ticket, saying, "Train leaves at 3:15, track 4. Frankie bought a ham sandwich and some hot chocolate and sat in the waiting area. It felt peculiar to mingle with the other passengers inside the warm station and to board the train along with them. Taking a seat by herself, she turned her face to the window and cried for Stewpot. The warmth of the car and the softness of the seat enveloped her, and in her exhaustion, she finally slept.